great to be here with you all today. I see many familiar faces and some new friends that I've yet to meet. Microsoft is such an important part of our ecosystem in Vancouver, and the contributions that you make are significant. What really could be more meaningful than our very own democracy and the role of AI and technology in democracy and the misinformation that has become so rampant in our civic engagement?
In 2024, over 2 billion people will have the opportunity to vote in nationwide elections, more than any other year in history. At the same time, the development of AI races on, offering extraordinary benefits, but also enabling bad actors. Our esteemed panel will dig into digital threats to democracy and the work that government, civil society, and technology companies can do to preserve election integrity, societal resilience, information literacy, and our democratic institutions.
From a media perspective, I can say that both AI and elections have prominently featured in our coverage and the coverage of others, but less prominent has been the connection between the two, and that's certainly worth exploring and examining. It's not new, the relationship between technology and new media and how it shapes elections and our perception of campaigns and political figures. How do you see technology and elections informing, shaping, influencing each other over time?
I grew up in Britain, as you can tell from my accent, and while televised debates between presidential candidates are obviously massive in the United States, does anyone want to guess the year of the first televised debate between leaders in the UK? 2010. 2010. This just, I think, shows us that different countries, despite being functioning democracies, can have different ways that they engage with new kinds of technologies. And we've already seen with generative AI that it's working in different ways in different countries, and I think we'll come in this conversation to talk about beneficial and harmful ways, but it's just to unfold for us that once we take the global view, there are lots of different potential paths for how we might be using Gen AI and how it might be affecting or not affecting different kinds of elections. And the British example, I think, shows us that it can be integral in different kinds of ways.
Amy, one thing that strikes me that's evolved as well is perhaps the role of industry and business as it relates to shoring up democracy, ensuring that the tools being developed assist for the betterment of all of us. Tell us a bit about your work and how you've seen this evolution in the relationship between technology and elections change.
The way that we think about our work, it's a lot about how can we protect the digital lives and well-being of people who depend on our products and services. And our team has a special focus and mission on stakeholders of democracy. So journalists, nonprofits, election officials, candidates, and campaigns. And how can we also bring the benefits of these new technologies like AI, both to help in the defense of these stakeholders of democracy and in helping them with their campaigns and politicking, whatever their party.
Are campaigns using AI? In what ways are they using AI?
So I'll give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtains. Obama's campaign really a lot of the campaign got a lot of attention because of how he used social media. But what got less attention, at least in the broader public, was his relationship and how his campaign reinvented how campaigns interact with data. The targeting is unbelievable. We can now pull in 150, 250 data sets on each individual profile. We can know with a 95% confidence how you're going to vote in the election.
A lot of the ways that we try to use AI internally are kind of how do we make the work more efficient and increase our productivity. And I think we're seeing those returns come to campaigns, many of whom, by the way, have a lot fewer resources. We've really seen a democratizing impact of AI. You know, this can allow candidates to reach people in all sorts of languages that they don't speak, in all sorts of geographies that they can't travel to, and in all sorts of media that, from handheld devices to radio to all sorts of ways of connecting with people where they're at.
Here in BC, we have this thing called the Open Data BC. It is terabytes of data is released almost every year. It's so much data, it's actually not transparent. With AI, we're now seeing the potential for individuals that can go in and just ask a question about a certain data set. So that democratizing effect is going to really rebalance the power between individuals and the state and individuals and corporations. And that, to me, is a really exciting feature of the potential for AI if it's used well.
I'm really glad you're bringing up those points, because so often when we have a discussion about Gen AI, it's all about the content, but you can't micro-target the content without the data.
How concerned are you, how concerned should we be about the integrity of our elections with this emergence of AI and its influence on democracy and democratic processes?
You know, one additional benefit that AI has especially brought within the last year or so has been the ability to help defend against cyber attacks in particular. Microsoft sees 65 trillion signals of threat activity per day, and AI has enabled us to help categorize and track and analyze that threat landscape in a way that was not really possible before. And that includes helping to track and analyze nation-state threat actor behavior, the particular actors, their trends, their profiles, their habits, and their targets. It's also helped us respond when there is an incident. It has brought down the incident response time to, maybe a couple days to a couple hours. This is the nature of the cat and mouse game of technology, that, that good actors are upskilling and trying to get better at using AI, and so are the bad actors. We've also seen the need to bring additional transparency to the information environment, whether that's by upranking authoritative sources and connecting voters to authoritative sources about where and how to vote. And also creating tools that allow politicians and candidates to put a digital watermark on their campaign images and materials. They can then say to people, this is from our campaign. You can have confidence that this is from us.
How concerned are you on the threat that AI poses to our democratic integrity?
Yeah, so in our report, we say we're less worried about it being persuasive and more worried about it being pervasive. And I think deepfakes are a very good example of that. So one of the things that we do see is deepfakes often being used as a way of intimidating candidates. For example, deepfakes of female candidates. This is something that can potentially be a huge form of online harassment. It can have a chilling effect, not only on the women who are currently running for office, but also on other women who are thinking about whether they might run for office. So I think if we think about Gen AI as just lowering the barrier to entry on producing those kind of deepfakes, it is concerning. At the same time, we have things like the BC Intimate Images Act, potentially the Online Harms Act on the federal level in Canada. So there's a lot of awareness that this is a problem. Goes back to the cat and mouse game that Amy was talking about, but I think I would see the Gen AI portion of this is accelerating a problem we already had by lowering the barrier to entry. So it means it's critical to have an awareness of this, and also to understand, I think, the potential long-term effects on if we want politicians who look like the diversity of our populations. These are the kinds of things that we need to address.
On the back end, part of where I'm a little concerned about AI and where we got to think about it is, we're familiar with how AI is now being used in the job application process in HR, and there are built-in biases in the data. As long as we're aware of these things, we can start to filter them out. We can start to work on workarounds. The bias is a concern. The harassment is definitely a concern. But I'm so encouraged by the work that Microsoft is doing, being aware of these threats and monitoring them and being able to zap them.
How can we use AI to address some of these issues that are occurring? How can we use AI to perhaps find a more collaborative way of moving forward? How can we advance what might be possible as the tools that exist today evolve?
One of the things that we've tried to do, especially this year, was something called the Tech Accord to combat the deceptive use of AI in elections, and that's a collaboration with now 27 tech companies to try to make it harder for bad actors to use our technologies in order to do harm in elections. Even if we didn't intend to be part of, the democracy discussion at our point of origin, we are a part of it now. A lot of the digital underpinnings of democracy run on servers and cables and emails and data that we are, and other tech companies are responsible for. We have a threat detection and notification service that protects over 5 million inboxes of stakeholders of democracy for free, and that's in 35 countries. It's both shining a light on it, helping to develop the technical tools to combat it, and also encouraging every stakeholder organization, whether it's government or civil society or citizens, to really continue to lift our media literacy bar and also our awareness, but without giving up on the entire democratic undertaking.
In the report that we wrote, one of the things that we try to do is really think through the different kind of steps of Gen AI, because we talked about it as if it's one thing, right? But there's obviously model design, implementation, distribution, reception, etc. And so one of the things that we can start thinking about are what are the different interventions that come at each one of those stages. That's, I think, one of the things that we can try and do as well, is disaggregate, okay, you know, there's the literacy piece, but then there's the sort of earlier portions of this, many of which Microsoft and other companies are involved in, and so we can think then about more targeted solutions for those different parts of what actually comes into making Gen AI. In the case of some studies that were done, that a huge amount of talking about disinformation can actually reduce all voters' trust in all information. That doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about the problem, but we need to think about different ways of framing it, think about how we empower people to find information, and the same is going to be true of Gen AI. You know, you run the risk if we talk about it only as a problem and one that can never be solved, that we disempower people from figuring out how to get information. So I think there are plenty of ways of getting reliable information. It's just a question of how we want to do that.
What are you going to pay attention to in this Votorama election year with the emergence of AI?
I'm going to keep paying attention to elections outside of the US. US is critical, but there were many other places that were voting, and what happens there is also tremendously important. I know Amy's been working on that as well, but I think it just reminds us also, because many of the things that come to North America, they happen elsewhere, and we need to pay attention to that.
I think the civic engagement piece, I'm hoping that at the end of this year, I can look back at this year and have the thought that not only were there all these elections that took place, but people showed up for democracy. They showed up to vote and to validate this form of government.
For a little bit of humor, one of the things I'm looking forward to is the humor that AI brings into our political discourse. You know, humor is an important part of the political dialogue, and there's some fun parts about this, and let's embrace the funny, and let's encourage our media to laugh at ourselves once in a while. And not everything needs to be serious all the time, and not everything needs to be hyper-partisan. We can all make fun of each other and laugh and come together and understand that, you know, we're going to go to the polls as Democrats and Republicans and New Democrats and Conservatives here in BC, but we're all going to watch the results as British Columbians, Canadians, and Americans.
This has been a wonderful panel. Thank you to each of you for your insights and expertise. A round of applause for folks.